That Great Business Show, Ireland's best business podcast.
Welcome to episode 131 of That Great Business Show, posting on the 17th of March 2023. That is St. Patrick's Day, if you didn't know it. So Banach di Law Eile Forlig Urlav Ilig is Misha Connell O'Moran agus Foiltister. Coming up, 45 minutes of business tips, insights and opportunities, thanks to Dundeal.ie. This is the show that does the thinking for you. Could the collapse of a Californian bank you probably had never heard of lead to lower interest rates on your loans and mortgages? And if you fancy a bicky, making it, that is, not eating it, well, where do you start? We have 3 alums of the Supervalu Food Academy with us to tell us if it's worth a bag of sugar. That Great Business Show.com is our website address. Sign up there to get sneak peeks of what's coming up and learn about a growing stable of podcasts, including The Fifth Court, the legal one, where you can learn some super tricks about business mediation from ace Cork lawyer Bill Holohan. That's on this week. All our business tips and insights are brought to you thanks to our sponsor, Dundeal Motors, the only place to go for your new or second-hand motor, all from the convenience of your smartphone.
Dundeal Motors is home to Ireland's largest range of new and premium used cars. That's why you'll find cars from Audi and BMW dealerships on Dundeal. Are you looking for a 7-seater to accommodate your growing family? Maybe you're after a luxury saloon to make a statement. We have the car for you. You'll also find Ireland's largest range of electric cars to help you make the switch. Visit Dundeal.ie today to start the search for your next car.
Viscosity. When you shave, you want the highest viscosity because it helps the blade run smoother. De facto, the world's best shaving oil, has incredible viscosity. That's why De facto leaves your face, underarms or legs nick-free. Higher viscosity makes blades last longer. De facto is the best for your skin and your pocket. DeFactoShave.com.
All That Great Business Show advertisers are Team GBS approved. Back them.
Now, unbelievable to think that the great financial crash hit 15 years ago. That means that listeners in their 30s have little or no concept of how it all unfolded. For them, it can be simplified to one big bank fail led to another. Simple as. So could the failures of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, Credit Suisse Bank lead to the same thing? Or, for the contrarians amongst you, could it actually lead to something positive, like big and quick interest rate cuts? Our favourite go-to analyst is Aidan Donnelly, head of Equities, and a 25-year veteran at Ireland's largest investment advisor, Davy. So, let's hear what he thinks. Welcome back to That Great Business Show, Aidan Donnelly.
How are you, sir?
I'm very well, but should I be worried? Should I be concerned?
Well, in order to make sure I don't get in trouble before we start, and I keep all of my compliance people happy, we have to say that nothing I say should be deemed to be a recommendation or anything of the like, and people need to get independent financial advice. So any companies we talk about, they're not recommendations. So we'll set that aside and we'll go on.
And I'll edit that out later on.
You can do whatever you like. My conscience is clear now.
Okay. There has been 1, 2, 3, is it 4 banks have now failed? And that's not good.
Well, no, Credit Suisse hasn't failed.
Well, sorry,
yet.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's only because they've got 50 billion. Let me tell you a story about a billion. Do you know how big a billion is? A million, I keep saying this to people, is a million seconds is about 12 days. A billion seconds is 32 years. It's huge.
It is
a big difference.
It's a big number, as they used to say.
And 50 billion into Credit Suisse overnight, that's a lot of money.
It's a backstop loan, yeah. Okay, well, look, I think we need to take a little step back and look, because obviously the big question is this something what we in the trade would call systemic? Is there a risk that it takes down more and more banks? And when you understand what's gone on in all of these cases, you realise that actually it probably isn't systemic. And that ties into your next point is, what does that mean for interest rates from the central banks? And as we record this, we've just obviously heard that the European Central Bank has put up interest rates 50 basis points or 0.5%, as they had said they were going to do, and they have not taken any further interest rate increases off the table. They say it's going to be data dependent. So let's go back to talk about SVB, or Silicon Valley Bank. What had ultimately happened here is during kind of 2019, 2020 and into 2021, there was lots of small startup companies that got a lot of money, raised a lot of money through venture capital and all of those types of things. And they put all of that money into their bank account. And the basic idea was that they would then use that money as the years go on to basically fund their operations. And that's what they did. When you got into last year, because of the turmoil that we saw in markets, what you saw was that they weren't willing to go back into the market to raise more money, because obviously valuations were coming down. So they have to be selling equity or shares in their company at a lower level than they would have done in 2020. And 2021. So what they said was, well, we'll park the idea of raising any more money and we'll just use the funds that we have. So they keep on taking the money out of the bank, as is their right, and to pay their salaries and all of that type of thing. So that was fine. Silicon Valley Bank, though, and this is where what probably caused a bit of a problem, was they took all of those deposits and they said, oh, well, you know what? We know what goes on here. These aren't going to be called for anytime soon. So we're going to invest these into government securities like, US treasuries or mortgage-backed securities, plain vanilla stuff. And we'll try to pick up a little bit of yield on it, because we're basically paying the depositor, the companies, nothing, because the rates are down at zero. But we might be able to make, 0.5% or 1% or whatever it is with this money.
And 0.5% on billions and billions can all add up.
Correct. So that's what they did. And the problem with it was, though, when you buy all of those kind of longer dated maturities, as bond yields and interest rates started going up, which they did last year because inflation was high and the central banks put the interest rates up, the value, as bond yields go up, the value of them goes down, okay? And that's the simple mechanism. So what you had a situation was that all of the portfolio of bonds that Silicon Valley had put all the deposit money into started going down in value. Now, if they were in a position to be able to what's called hold it to maturity, okay, so basically just in the same way that when you buy a 10-year bond, a government bond, you're giving money to the government, your choice is you can sell it anytime you like, but the only guarantee you have is that if you hold it for the 10 years, you get your capital back in exactly what it was, so the €100 back, and you get your interest rates all the way along. The problem for Silicon Valley Bank is as bond yields started to go up, the value of those bonds started to go down, but the companies who had been depositing the money started to need their money because they, again, as I said, needed to pay the salaries and things like that. So what happened to Silicon Valley Bank was they had to start, they were faced with the option of cashing in a load of these bonds to meet the deposits. The problem that they've got in that situation is once you cash those bonds in, you automatically realise the loss that has amassed in it. If you hold it to maturity, it's on the never, and there's never a loss. But they moved, and not to bore people about the accounting rules, but they moved their securities from what's called held to maturity to available for sale. And once you do that, you have to start marketing to market. Now, the other thing that the bank were kind of playing a little bit of a game with too was to say, look, we've loads of money here that we're offside in, okay? Why don't we just sell them, take the hit, we'll raise some equity capital, that'll offset the hit, but then going forward, we'll be able to invest that money at higher yields because bond prices and interest rates have gone up. And in a few quarters' time, we'll be making profits on those and it'll look very, very good to the market that we're making very, very good earnings. The problem was, as soon as they sold the securities, they weren't in an ability to raise the equity that they needed to offset the realised loss. And that's where that thing is. So it's a very, very specific problem that they came into.
And there's another side story to that is they brought in an advisor whom we won't name, and that advisor went off trying to raise some cash for them. But another part of that advisor that we won't name but begins with G went off and told their clients to get the money out of there. ASAP. I met during the week with a guy called David Siegel. He's the CEO of a big US company called Meetup. And he told me that all of their cash was with Silicon Valley Bank. And he told me that his life almost ended on last Friday through the weekend. They couldn't get to the cash, couldn't pay bills. And their CFO spent the entire weekend awake trying to get cash out. Couldn't.
And I think the thing to bear in mind is the other thing that has exacerbated the situation was if you look at the deposit flows into Silicon Valley Bank in the previous 2 years, they were actually getting deposits at a rate probably 4 times what the normal banking system was because of the nature of the customer base that they had, which was all of these tech firms that had raised a load of money and they were parking the money in their bank account, and that was perfectly the sensible thing to do. So if you look at it last Thursday, I think I've seen figures something around the tune of they saw outflows of deposits of 42 billion in a day. Right now, sounds again massive number, and it was. But ultimately,
it costs about 70 odd billion to run this country for a year.
Yeah,
42 billion puts that in perspective.
It does. But the thing to bear in mind, and this is where it's different from typical bank runs in the past. I think what you've got to bear in mind is now, typically in the past, people would have said a bank run and you would have seen people queuing up outside the door, right? And everybody went, oh my God, there's something going on there, right? Now, people are just doing an electronic fund transfer. So you're not limited to the amount of cash that's in the branch that you happen to go to get your money out. You can move any amount you want as quickly as you want, boom, and it's done, right? So that was the Silicon Valley Bank. Now, what happened ultimately over the weekend was, the US Federal Reserve, which is the central bank, stepped in and said, listen, we're going to guarantee all depositors their things. And sorry, that was the other thing. A lot of these deposits were over the 250,000 limit that the bank guarantee automatically triggers for the US. So
I'm sure some of them are 250 million.
Probably could have been, yeah. Could have been. So they wouldn't have had insurance or the cover from what's called the FDIC or the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. But once the Fed came in and said, listen, we're going to backstop all of the deposits, so you don't need to worry about it. And that's ultimately what's happened. We saw also over the weekend that the UK branch was bought by HSBC. Now, put it in context, HSBC has probably in excess of about $300 billion of deposits. So it had more than enough deposits. It wasn't going to face it. So it's in times like this that people realise that going with the very big banks actually makes sense. And that's what we've seen. We've seen massive flows of deposits into the JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas, the Citigroups, all of these from some of the smaller regional banks. We've seen that go on this week. So then, that was Silicon Valley Bank. In and of itself, a problem, but nothing actually, a bloody nose more than anything else. Then you obviously had the Credit Suisse situation in the state, in Switzerland. What happened there really is that Credit Suisse is in the process of trying to reorganize itself. It has had a pretty torrid time in terms of operations. As I said, I read somebody today, they've managed to shoot themselves 5 times in the foot. Now, I don't know how many feet they've got, but it doesn't look particularly good when you do that. So they're trying to restructure their business.
Every form of badness that can be done by bankers has occurred in that bank.
Yeah, pretty much, right, yeah. Pretty much. And they are facing, they've obviously a huge restructuring. They're going to carve out their investment bank business, which is a reasonably good business, and they're going to rebrand it Credit Suisse First Boston, which ironically, you'll be old enough to remember.
I remember.
Its first incarnation.
CSFB, as it was.
CSFB, yeah. Correct. So that's coming back to a movie store near you, right? and then they're going to get a whole load of assets that are kind of very poor quality, going to ring fence them and try to flog them off. And then what will be left will be the private bank and the bank in Switzerland, right? And the issue, I suppose, for them really is an operational one and a profitability one, because they've lost so much money in terms of people getting fed up with them, taking deposits out. On the private banking side of it, the performance of their investments have been poor and people have pulled money out. a lot of their revenue is coming down, but they haven't adjusted the cost base. So you're going to see a couple of more quarters of fairly ropey earnings numbers coming out from them because profitability is not good. Now, there's a difference here about, and what made the original global financial crisis, it was about solvency and liquidity. None of what's gone on in the last week is about solvency and liquidity. You know, the capital ratios are very strong in the banks. The liquidity positions are very strong in the banks. But the problem with this, and people in some cases have short memories, and some cases have very long memories, depending on what you're talking about. But the long memories have always been exactly as you said at the start. The headlines of bank in trouble, oh, and then suddenly we're in the global financial. It's very different this time, and because it's a different problem this time.
Now, you said about the American situation that part of the problem was to do with interest rates being pushed up. And it looks now like the Americans may be about to stop putting up, maybe going down.
Yeah, look, I think, and the European situation is the same. Like, if you go back, and there's going to be a big test. We saw the European Central Bank with the test today. The Fed is going to have the test next week. And the big test for them is, you know, the reason they've been putting up interest rates has been because inflation was very strong, right? And they've been hell-bent on fighting inflation. Inflation hasn't gone away as a problem, right? And we saw that as recently as last week when the CPI numbers came out in the US.
But you and I would agree that interest rates have so little effect on the two major issues that I use the past tense, driven inflation: oil, which was Putin, and the supplies out of China, which had things to do with the Panama Canal and stuff.
That's for Europe. US is very different. Okay, so those factors are less of an issue in the US. What's more of an issue is what they call kind of sticky inflation. It's things like services, it's things like wages, it's things like shelter costs. They've been the ones that have been driving, and that's what the Fed, the US Federal Reserve, is looking at all the time, trying to get that down. So the big question is, if inflation hasn't gone away, well, the central banks need to continue. Although the market is pricing now that you're going to have rates coming down significantly in the back half of this year. What's been funny so far this year is we came in expecting rates to do a certain thing. In the last couple of weeks, since up until kind of middle of last week, actually expectations had been that interest rates were going to go higher than people had thought at the start of the year. That's all been washed out of the market. Now, we will see in the coming days and weeks whether some of that gets priced back into the market. And my sense is it will, because I'm not sure what has happened with Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and Credit Suisse necessarily has a big impact on the economy. And those economic issues, which ultimately the central banks are focused on, haven't gone away and won't go away just because of some of these. So it is important to think, and we will see what ultimately happens. Now, I think that the final thing to bear in mind is we've obviously seen an awful lot of volatility in the share prices of banks, and that's the kind of the last bit to think about. Now, I do think that is far more reflective of positioning within the market, particularly in Europe.
Now, when you use the term positioning, it's a technical term.
It is.
What does that mean?
It basically means when you look at the full gamut of investors out there, how much bank shares do they own, or how much market exposure do they have? And you definitely, and this really applies to the hedge funds. We talked the last time I was here in December, we talked about how important or how much of a driving force the hedge funds had been last year. They continue this year. So they would have come in and had been fully invested in equity markets from day one of this year. And the reason they did that was they were hoping to try drag some of the money off the sidelines in. So when that money's coming in, it gives them the opportunity to exit without kind of selling against themselves, all right? And what we saw is in the last couple of weeks, we've seen that kind of fully long position, as we call it, and so that you're fully invested in the US, come down, okay, from the hedge funds, but it stayed high in Europe and it stayed high in their exposures in Japan. coupled with that, in Europe, you had everybody fully invested in their positions in Europe, and probably having more exposure to the banks than they would normally have because they saw interest rate expectations going up, and interest rate expectations going up. If interest rates go up, that's seen as positive for the banks because they get a better interest margin, a net interest margin. So they would have been, as we call it, max long because they were fully invested, and overweight because they had more banks than they should have. So the real volatility, I think, in the last couple of days has been about the reduction of not only exposure to Europe, but also getting down the overweight. Now, this could take another couple of days for it to all sort out.
But it is days. It doesn't go on forever.
No, it doesn't go on forever because these guys operate very, very quickly. They're in and they're out. And so you will see it in a couple of days. And you're starting to see some of it potentially today in that there's a kind of a differentiation of performance in certain European banks. The better quality, really, strong banks actually were up a decent bit as I was leaving the office, and some of the poorer or lesser banks, their share prices were down on the day. So you're still going to see that, all right? And ultimately, it comes back to the same question of what are the central banks going to do in interest rates? Ironically, everybody had been expecting a 50 basis point or a 0.5% rise from the central bank, the European Central Bank, because they told them at the last meeting that was what was going to happen. And everybody was then in the last couple of days going, oh my God, they're not going to go. They can't go. Like, the irony of it is, if the European Central Bank had gone, said no change in interest rates or, only 0.25%, right? The market would have worried itself. They know something that we don't know.
You can't win.
They definitely know something, right? They've seen the banks. They know something. So they were absolutely right to go and say, listen, we told you we were going to do 0.5%. We've done 0.5%. We've also told you that going forward, it'll be very much dependent on what the economic data and the inflation data is, whether we do any more. And lo and behold, they come out. Christine Lagarde came out and said today, I think we were having a joke in the office before I came out, and he said, how many times did she mention the word data dependent, right? Everything is now data dependent, data dependent, data dependent. So if inflation stays high...
I can tell really good jokes on Davy.
And if the economic data or the inflation data stays high, well, then they're going to continue to raise interest rates, and that's just the nature of it.
So that's the bad news. Tell me some good news before I kick you out of here.
Well, I think ultimately the good news is that none of what we've seen so far has really a direct economic impact. The US economy continues to grow nicely, and the balance sheets of corporates continue to be good. Balance sheets of people continues to be good. I think there are probably a few more issues in Europe because the economic growth is not what it is in the US, and you have a situation where the central bank have been raising interest rates, which is not great. So, down the line, could there be trouble with kind of loan impairments and things like that? Yeah, that's always a possibility when interest rates going up and people are pinned to the collar in terms of higher food costs, higher, energy has backed out, but and not necessarily seeing wage inflation.
Final question, and if you can answer it very briefly, please, is all of the tech layoffs in Ireland now, does that worry you at all? Not
particularly. I think twofold. One, I think a lot of as a shareholder in an awful lot of the companies that are laying people off, I think it's a very good idea because you need to manage your costs. I think they'd gotten too blasé about hiring people and things like that. But actually from a national situation, I think the thing to bear in mind is a lot of the big tech companies had probably crowded out some of the domestic companies who were looking to hire tech talent, right? But couldn't afford the rates that the big tech guys were able to pay. Now they're getting people coming back onto the jobs market and are willing to take a lower wage, and still a very, very good wage, but a lower wage, and they'll get availability. So you might actually get a kind of an evening out of the workforce within that, more towards maybe some domestic people that or domestic companies that actually need to be picking up tech staff.
Aidan Donnelly of Davy Stockbrokers, thanks again for joining us again on That Great Business Show.
Done Deal Motors is home to Ireland's largest range of new and premium used cars. That's why you'll find cars from Audi and BMW dealerships on Done Deal. Are you looking for a 7-seater to accommodate your growing family? Maybe you're after a luxury saloon to make a statement. We have the car for you. You'll also find Ireland's largest range of electric cars to help you make the switch. Visit dundeal.ie today to start the search for your next car.
Want to increase sales, reduce overheads and provide customers with a better service? Then use Big Red Web, the easiest way to develop and maintain your website. It gives you powerful business reporting, digital marketing and automatically integrates with the award-winning Big Red cloud accounting software. It's a game changer for SME businesses. It's so good, the government gives you a €2,500 grant towards it. Big Red Web, e-commerce made simple. BigRedCloud.com/web.
All that great business show advertisers are Team GBS approved. Back them.
The Supervalu taste of local guest stars will soon be in the 150 Supervalu stores nationwide. It is one of a number of programs by retailers to help Indigenous food producers to grow by giving, in this case, 5 guest stars a taste of the big time and listing them across the country. There is a very, very long queue to get onto the program. So if you want to be a picky baker or a pizza producer, what are the hacks to get to the top of that queue? We have 3 of the 5 winners with us in studio. The other 2 were too busy making and baking. So I am delighted to welcome Erica Sheehan of Homespun, Ger Devin of West Cork Biscuits, and Gavin Cassidy of Porter and Nash to That Great Business Show. Welcome all.
Thank you very much.
you.
I love there's a little gap there that always makes me very nervous. Is, oh God, these fellas are never going to talk. They talked the hind leg off me 5 seconds ago. We always start with a very hard question. Erica, are you ready?
Go.
Why is quinoa pronounced quinoa?
Oh my goodness, that comes up all the time at tastings. Yes, it's quinoa. So we joke sometimes that we're keen on quinoa.
Why is it called quinoa, not quinoa as it is spelt?
Do you know if you have the answer for me? I'd love to know.
Tell us about your business. You have a Quinoa Crunch. It's the brand name is Homespun. And sitting in front of me here is literally that gorgeous, really gorgeous packaged product.
Thank you so much. So I started Homespun in 2016 after a career in, I suppose, the media originally and then in PR. I always wanted to set up my own business. And frankly, that's a beat that just inside got louder and louder, this urge to do my own thing. And the only thing I really had a real feel for was food. And I started my business at the Honest to Goodness Farmers Market in Glasnevin in Dublin. Great springboard for food brands and just loved it from the get-go. I knew that was it.
You worked in PR, you said. Was that awful that you decided to actually set up your own business? Because your own business is difficult, very difficult.
It is definitely hard work. I think you really need to love what it is that you decide to devote yourself to. And luckily, I love food. I sleep, eat and breathe it. So that aspect of it is effortless. And if you love it, it'll get you through the hard times. I was actually doing PR for Coca-Cola, somewhat ironically now, given that I have a health and wellness brand. Amazing company, amazing brands, really creative and commercial environment. To be honest with you, you know, as regards where we are now with the Homespun brand, I don't think I'd even be where I am if it hadn't been for that background. So really appreciate it. But I definitely had the 7-year itch. And as I say, I always want to do my own thing. And it was always going to be food for me.
So you did a Coca-Cola MBA. Gavin, Gavin, your company is Porter and Nash. What does Porter and Nash do?
We make plant-based gravies and sauces.
Why?
This actually started from, we went back to college, myself and Owen. And Owen Lennon being my business partner. So we went back to college and a module in the college was actually product development.
Where were you?
In Tala, in TU Tala. And so a module was for product development, a new product development. And we developed a lot of products and we thought this one was unique. So we did a lot of research, and it was unique. There wasn't a gravy, a plant-based gravy with infused with seaweed on the market.
I'd say there probably wasn't.
No,
funnily enough.
So that's where it happened, and then we were advised, or we were asked maybe to go to the Food Academy, which was a great move. with the Food Academy, it makes it a lot easier to get into retail. Like, retail is tough. So the
Food Academy, but just to remind people, is run by Supervalu.
It's run by Supervalu, Supervalu Food Academy, and it's great. It gives you a footing there to get into to retail, and it has, all the backing that you need. All the expertise, all the, you can ask them any question anytime. You can pick up the phone.
Well, I'm going to ask you in a second as to how you got onto that. But what was the background that got you into food in the first place?
Oh, right. I've been chefing for the last 35 years, and yeah, loved it. Always loved cooking. And just, I travelled. I went to Australia for a while. I travelled. And constantly been cooking for 35 years in a lot of different places.
Now, we've all seen the cookery shows where they're all shouting at you in the kitchen and all the rest. So it is a tough business. But is it a walk in the park compared to running your own business?
Oh, ooh, yeah, no. It's on par. It's quite difficult.
That's an honest answer. Good.
Yeah, but it's as I say, the help is great. And without the help, it's pretty daunting.
Did you ever think of giving up your new business?
Did I ever think of giving it up?
Yeah, did you wake up one day? I think I'll just go back into a kitchen.
Oh yeah, there's definitely days that are tough. Really tough. And obviously when you're trying to build a brand. It's tough, but persevere and hopefully you'll get through it, which we have.
And doing well. So let me go back to Ger Devin of West Cork Biscuits. Now, when you listen to Ger's voice, he is definitely not from West Cork. What is your background? How did you get into it?
My background is I've been in the retail trade for about 35 years. Started out repping with a company called Albright & Wilson doing Procter & Gamble, selling detergent and nappies. And I progressed to biscuits. So about 13 years ago, I started my own business. And part of my business was I linked up with the enterprise board. And they saw I had a background in biscuits. And they put me in touch with Richard and Jane Green.
Is this your local Enterprise office or Enterprise Ireland or?
Enterprise board in Cork, of all places. We had a conversation, met them through a networking meeting, and they said, we'd love you to chat to some people in Cork. And I said, yeah, let's go down and have a chat. Richard and Jane met them, and they're baking biscuits up on the top of a mountain in Dunmanway in a place called Mulrish.
Probably the most beautiful place ever to make a biggie.
Absolutely. You just can't get to it. You can't even get a 40-foot, never mind a rigid truck up the road to it.
So how do you get up and down, actually, as a real business case?
As a real business case, we had to move premises.
Oh, okay.
If you can understand, Richard and Jane started off baking patisserie royale for the markets. Richard's background was purely about chefing, knew everything about chefing, knew how to make foods, made it for the high-end trade and everything else. And he did the markets, and then he suddenly discovered there was no money in baking fancy cakes like they do in France, and so he started making biscuits. And then he started to produce a brand called Cookies of Character. So I went down anyway, had a look at this, and it was really interesting because we had one little shed on the side at the back of their house, which was a bakery, and we had another shed across the yard, which was the packing shed. So when it rained, you really couldn't pack biscuits because you run the gauntlet of the rain with the biscuits in the tray to get across to pack and get back. Anyway, all fun and games. And basically we took the business by the scruff of the neck. I knew my way around the trade. Richard knew his way around the biscuits. So we came to an agreement. He'd never talk to a customer and I'd never bake a biscuit. And we've never clashed since.
And millions have been made since.
Absolutely.
Have you all been on the Food Academy, first of all?
Yeah,
Erica? Yeah,
that was pretty much my first move.
How did you get onto that? Because that's what we're here to talk about. I want you all to tell me what's the secret of getting onto the Food Academy?
So I applied early in case I didn't get it. I thought if I had to apply a few times, I'm just going to go for it right away.
And by early, you mean?
Pretty much, while I was in the farmer's market at that time, I didn't have, proper packaging. I didn't have a brand, really. I was just, I suppose, testing whether people would be prepared to hand over their money for our quinoa crunch granolas, which they were. And that gave me, I suppose, I felt like I verified my assumptions. And then my next step was to apply to the Food Academy. I was absolutely thrilled to get on. I remember.
Did you get on first time?
Yes, I did. And I was absolutely delighted. It was summer of 2016. Certainly at the time, it was 4 separate days, very immersive training, a little bit like a boot camp. Musgraves Supervalu introduce you to subject matter experts, key people in the business. You learn about small business accounting, something I didn't have a breeze about. You learn about marketing. You learn about, basic things like, the difference between markup and margin, and, it was absolutely invaluable. But I mean, they really bring out the top brass in the business. Your hand is held. It's a fantastic process. And coming from the background I did in Coke, I knew that was not the reception that, people in the grocery world get from the multiples, normally. So it's a fantastic program. It's very, very practical. But one thing I would say that I personally benefited from a lot was the network that you get. You start making friends with a lot of other food businesses, and that's the gift that keeps on giving, really, because you remain in contact, and you're always helping each other out, trading bits of intel and leads on whether it's packaging or suppliers or what have you.
And that is something we keep telling people on That Great Business Show, is that businesses help other businesses, so long as they're not eating your lunch. Isn't that it? Now, Ger Devin, you have, to pick up on what Erica was saying there, you've actually been selling it for many years into the multiple. So you know how those people, those lovely people, operate. Have you been skinned by them?
Absolutely. And if you're not skinned every day, you don't learn something every day. So every day you go out and you learn something more. Even this morning I was out packing shelves in a local Supervalu, putting the product on the shelf. What I found was when we kind of did a slightly different way to go into the Food Academy than Erica did. We actually went around the local stores in Cork and we approached the individual stores and asked, could we put it in a little bit cheekier? And we got our product on the shelf.
Now, people say that, but how difficult is that? I mean, you knock on the door and they say, not another bunch of bickies.
Absolutely. And that's where you've got to just have full faith in your product. Take out a biscuit and say, taste it. Let's eat it together, eat a biscuit, and just see the reaction on their face. Talk about them, how you're going to do, what you're going to do for that business, how it's going to be beneficial for them to have your product on the shelf. Once we got that, we then got, again, we had to apply to the Food Academy, and then we got grilled on a day of interview process where the whole team came down. Part of the grilling, though, I really enjoyed it because I was used to dealing with the multiples from another side. But this grilling was, we're going to hold your hand through the grilling. We're going to help you to get through the grilling. And we're going to make sure you come out the grilling the other side. It was a great learning process. And like Erica said, I was expecting to go in and come out with nothing on the back. But I actually said, I came out with my shirt. That was great. But I came out with a great learning curve. And it was really more encouragement that they want you to make it in the business. I went in very ambitious that I could service all 250 stores straight away. And your man said to me, looked at me, and I remember turning around, he said, look, I know you, Dev. Yeah, I know you. Can we just start with 15 stores and get them really spotting right? And I also remember saying to myself, he's trying to tell me something here. I'm not just sure, but I'll work it out in a second. And it was very true. To get your process set up, to get your ingredients set up, to get the whole trading part worked out, make sure your barcode's right, your packaging is right, your shelf-ready concept is right, and you've got to get all these right. Let's get it right in 10 to 15 stores. Make all your mistakes, and then when you get the next move, you're moving on, and you're moving on, and you're moving on.
Now, I know from what Ger's just said that we can all call him Dev. Did you hear that? Because we're pals now. Gavin, you have already said you were on the Food Academy. When did you go on to the Food Academy and how did you get on?
We got on in 2018. So we went on and we pitched, like everyone, you have to pitch your product. So before we pitched our product, we did a bit of research what was trending at the time. So veganism was trending, seaweed was trending. So we married the two together and we came up with this product. And so the Supervalu Food Academy liked the product. So like Erica and Dev has Erica and Dev have said, it's holding your hand through the process, and I'm coming from food service, and retail is completely different. It's okay making a product or so, but getting it on a shelf is hard. Getting it off a shelf is even harder. So with the Supervalu Food Academy, all the support that you're given is it brings you along that journey and gets you onto the shelf. And yes, it's only a couple of stores to start with, But then it progresses and it grows, with there's a lot of things that you can do, like a lot of advertising through all your different social medias, and Supervalu again help you with that, which is great. It's a good program.
And growing is great, but growing can also cause its own problems. There are a couple of things I'll tell you. Once upon a time, I was with the people from 8 Degrees Brewing, and they created a space on the shelf to get their beer onto it. Others followed, pushed them off. They had to go and create again to get back on again. And I could hear tough. So, Erica, has anybody tried to eat your... Obviously, lots of people have eaten your quinoa, but has anybody tried to eat your lunch?
So, I mean, maybe that will come. I mean, Homespun is about healthier alternatives to what's on offer. So our quinoa crunch is, better for you granola. Our chicory root syrup.
That's good, isn't it? The ad is there.
Our chicory root syrup is a low sugar vegan honey alternative. So what we're doing is a little bit different, and we like to think that we're a little bit ahead of the curve. I think it's certainly the way the market is going, but we're out there, we're doing what we're doing, and really, really pleased with the way it's going.
Well, you start with 15 odd or whatever it is that you start with, but when you get to 150 or 250 stores, it's just another planet. So you have to produce for that number of stores. And if it doesn't sell, you'll be looking at a lot of boxes for many years to come.
Yeah, I remember. So when we were in the farmers market, we used to make everything ourselves. And I realised, that this was not sustainable, into the future, that I really needed to get a partner in terms of manufacturing. And
so what you had been doing was you were mixing this on your kitchen table type of thing?
Literally, we were making it ourselves. Now, the HSE had come out and inspected and everything was being done right and everything. But it was hard work, I can tell you. You have kind of a lot of respect for people who do the manufacturing when you've done it yourself. And I think it's really, really important to do it yourself, so you're very familiar with your own processes. Obviously, so what happened in our case was once we were in the farmers market and I was really bitten by the bug and we got onto the Food Academy, I decided, okay, I'm a real believer in, focus your time and energy on what you're good at. And I certainly love the sales, I love the marketing, I love the new product development, I like being out and about, connecting with retailers and so forth. But I really don't know anything about large scale manufacturing or anything like that. So we identified a lovely bakery, also in West Cork, who do all of our baking for us.
You're allowed to give them a shout out if you want.
Yes, they're called Biagán Brescia and they're in Ballingeary. And if Catherine, if you're listening, and Rolandus and the rest of the team, they're fantastic people. And I always say that this would be a bit of advice to anyone who might be listening in, looking to, because it is the eternal question for a startup food businesses. Do you go down that kind of path of continuing to produce yourself, or do you outsource production? I would say, if you can find people who are big enough to do things right, but small enough to want to talk to you, that's the sweet spot. And so our manufacturers definitely fall into that category. And
how did you find them? Because that'll be the next question. Say, there must be a dozen or 5 dozen manufacturers out there.
Well, how I found them was, certainly when we were in the farmers market, everybody loved the taste of our quinoa crunch, and I wanted to make sure that the standards didn't slip. So taste is everything when it comes to food. I mean, obviously you like the packaging and so forth, but at the end of the day, it's all about taste. So I wanted to find a bakery that does things right. And what I did was I went at it backwards. I said, who in Ireland has won awards for what they do?
Okay, that's a good one. I like that.
Thank you. I've told a lot of startups about that one.
We always tell people, go in for awards. They're free normally, and you never know, such as you, where it'll get you. They've got business out of that award.
Yeah. So I linked up with the bakery we work with, and that was the same for the folks in County Laois who bottle our chicory root syrup for us, G's Jams, lovely family business there.
Dev, you don't mind if I call you Dev?
I don't mind at all, you're fine.
You're obviously manufacturing yourselves there,
Absolutely.
But now, if you are going to 150 or 250 stores, that's a big, big jump.
Yeah, it is. So what you do, you buy yourself a Ford Transit van and you don't drive around the cushy car anymore. And that's what I did.
And you are knocking on every Supervalu store, first thing in the morning, last thing at night.
Yeah. So what I did was that I managed to find people that are passionate about the business, similar to myself. I have guys who work within the business. So what I should say to you, just before I started with the bakery, I started a field marketing business as well for merchandising and contract salespeople. And that's where I still get the people from. And I still have these guys working with me. And we're on to central billing within Supervalu. So it's a matter of trying to build up that network, and that takes time. Shoe leather, first of all, your own shoe leather, first of all. Go out and prove it to someone that does sell. I'd have no problem loading up the van, load of biscuits, heading off into the west, meeting the retailers, how we keeping, how we doing. Even with Supervalu and on the guest star list this time round, we got into stores that we didn't get in beforehand, and we were only down one of them the other day down in Houston Station, and the guy turned around and said, I want the rest of the range in. Now, we've been knocking on that door. Don't ask me how many different ways.
That is fantastic to hear.
But it just, you've got to keep going. Shoe leather, in, out, in, out.
And remind people, how many years have you been an overnight success since you've been an overnight success? When did you start, not your original journey, but when did you start working with the bickies? 10 years ago I started working with the bickies. So now you're being accepted. That's just to remind people, it's a long time.
You've just got to keep on. And the other thing about it is, just because you're in a store doesn't mean you're going to be permanently there either. So you'll be in a store. So I was in Sundrive there today, going around Sundrive, and I was in the store, I was out of the store, then I got back in the store, then something else happened in the store. Now I'm back, I was out for a while, and now I'm back in again.
And by out of store, you mean that you have been effectively delisted?
No, just my space went on the shelf.
What does that mean? Do you come up and flick them with the other people off?
No, my space got lost in over a period of time, and they changed the program. They changed a fixture around the store, and now they have a home. Now they have an actual spot in the store for Food Academy.
But the other ones have. I know the one in Mount Marion definitely had anyway.
They did.
And Clonakilty is a huge supporter,
Absolutely,
I think, as well. Yeah. We're going to run out of business, so run out of time, should I say. I could talk to you about this all the time.
You could.
Because it's bloody difficult. I keep saying bloody difficult, but everybody in business knows it's bloody difficult. Yeah. But somebody nicking your space.
Oh, it's just...
Gavin, same question.
That happens a lot.
Does it? But who else is making vegan seaweed gravy?
Yeah, we did. As I said, we researched it. We got Board B to actually research it to see was it anywhere else in the world
Did that
producing
cost you
anything.
To go to Board B?
No, not at all.
Please listen to that. Board B is sitting there.
Yeah,
they are another resource. Your taxes have paid for them. Use them.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I forgot the question.
I was asking about you and getting on space, and somebody comes along and pushes you off, but they weren't selling presumably vegan seaweed gravy because nobody else makes it. I presume.
We obviously a unique product, so we had to educate the customer on how to utilise the product.
Uh-huh.
So the way we were doing it was we would go in and do tastings here. We'd write up recipes surrounding the product. At the moment, we have a recipe cookbook on porternash.ie.
Why is it called Porter Nash? I meant to ask you that initially.
That's a strange question, actually. It's a strange answer. It was a pint of porter in Nash Street.
But of course.
Yeah.
Makes total sense now.
Well, I tell you, it's a more clever way of branding than I've heard a lot of other people who spend 25 or 250,000 euro.
A name is so difficult.
Yeah.
It really is. A name is so difficult.
I keep telling people, 2 cheap bottles of wine, locked door.
Absolutely.
And that's the end of it at that.
Or a couple of pints of porter.
Well, there you go. Same idea. West Cork Biscuits. I mean, that's it. Now, I have to wrap this because, before I do, I have 2 questions each for you. One question for all of you is one tip to anybody and everybody listening, how or what they should do to get onto the Food Academy or to get into food. Or maybe you're going to say, don't go into food. Erica.
Yeah, well, if your mind is made up and that's the route you want to go, I would say if you're not already going to your local Supervalu store, start going, because your local store is a huge asset. My local store, Mount Marion, fantastic bunch of people, and they have done things. I'm not even sure if I should be saying this on air, but they have printed off all sorts of helpful information about the category for me, and given me a lot of insight and support and intel. So talk to retailers. Friends and family will sugarcoat things for you, but retailers absolutely won't. Go in on a quiet Tuesday morning and be nice, and they will be very, very helpful.
Top tip, Ger, what's yours?
Think big, very big. Have a plan mapped out in your head. Know where you want to go. and work it and talk to the retailers.
You see, now you've said the word big, which means overseas. But I'll have to have you all back in again to talk about it. Have any of you gone overseas yet?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
you've already... Not yet.
No, but we have a trademark in the US.
In the US?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Sorry, as I say, you're all coming back again because I have to ask more questions. Dev, one good tip for people to get onto the Food Academy, please.
Talk to the retailer.
That's the same as, yeah?
Absolutely. Go in and talk to lads, but have that plan in your hand. Know what you want to do and be absolutely passionate about it and stick to it. But get the feedback and then adjust your plan. But keep moving forward. Don't stop just because you get a wallop on the back of the head and someone says, you're not coming in here. You go back out again. You keep on going. 10 years later, I got into a store.
Gavin, your top tip, please.
Do your research. Find the gap in the market. Find the product that's suitable for that gap in the market, and work on the product until it's up and it's mastered, and then bring it to the Supervalu Food Academy.
Now, you have all been asked to check out Heart and Heartbeat. Gavin, who would you hire in a heartbeat?
Well, I've been following Sam Dennigan over in the States.
Sam.
Yeah. So I would hire him in a heartbeat. He's doing really well over in the States, and that would be a great little door to open for myself.
Roots.
Yeah,
Well, of course
strong
it
roots.
would be,
It would,
yeah.
yeah.
And he's a lovely guy.
We have an export product. It's an ambient product with a good shelf life.
If I were to ask you 5 or 10 years ago, did you have an ambient product with a good shelf life? What would you have said to me?
I would have said I might have one in the kitchen somewhere.
There you go. That is fantastic. But all of you coming back because I need to know more. Ger, your Heart and Heartbeat.
It's going to be up to one of the children if they'd even come on board.
One of your kids?
One of my kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'd like to see this business keep on going on into the future. And how do you make it? How do you continue with a business into the future? It's going to be the next generation. It's not going to be me. We've 35 families living out of a bakery in Dunmanway.
That is fantastic.
We want to keep it going that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just for listeners, he's looking very healthy at the moment.
Thank you.
He's looking really well. And Erica, what is your Heart and Heartbeat?
So, certainly someone I would love to have a coffee with would be Chupi Sweetman from Chupi,
Chupi, yeah.
jewellery, the luxury jewellery brand. Personally, for me, packaging, design, I put a huge amount of effort into the way our homespun products look and feel. And I love the Chupi brand. I really admire Chupi Sweetman in terms of how she's grown her business from a one-woman operation and scaled it internationally, selling her beautiful brand in 52 countries. Making everything seem special, a lot of attention to detail. We put a lot of effort into our packaging, and I think food. It's a sensory experience. It's certainly about how things taste, but I think things. There are moments when they can be special, and food is not can be part of that. It's not outside of that, and just making things look and feel beautiful. And I think she's done an amazing job with that.
Nice choice. From all of you, actually. Please say that you will all come back because I want to hear about the export journey because that gets even more difficult. You're all going to export, are you?
Hopefully.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Erica, Ger, Dev, and Gavin, thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show.
Want to increase sales, reduce overheads, and provide customers with a better service? Then use Big Red Web, the easiest way to develop and maintain your website. It gives you powerful business reporting, digital marketing, and automatically integrates with the award-winning Big Red cloud accounting software. It's a game changer for SME businesses. It's so good, the government gives you a €2,500 grant towards it. Big Red Web, e-commerce made simple. BigRedCloud.com/web.
De facto shaving oil, made only from natural oils. Nothing nasty on your skin.
All That Great Business Show advertisers are Team GBS approved. Back them.
And that is it from That Great Business Show, episode 131. 45 minutes of business insights and inspiration, thanks to our sponsor, Dundeal.ie. That is the place to find your next car, new or second-hand. And a big thanks to Team GBS member Zara Ahern at Hopkins Communications in Cork for organising those lovely bakers and cakers. Sign up to our website, thatgreatbusinessshow.com, so you will know first what's coming up next on the show. You can also check out our LinkedIn page. Keep in touch with us regarding guest suggestions there too, please. And I think we have well over 10,000 people chatting to us now on LinkedIn these days. If you would like to advertise with us, do not be shy. We are certainly not. Contact us as usual again on LinkedIn or through the website. We record at the Dublin South Podcast Studios, where Lee Brennan is today's sound engineer. Later, Neil Horner will polish up our beautiful commercial sound in post-production. And don't forget Business Plus magazine. It's out now, and I star in it about the podcast again. So from me, Conal Moran, Mila Buchas, for listening, agus Slán Tamil.